is made up of women, and that women form the majority of workers at the front line, we thought it would be really interesting to unpack how access to information, education is influenced by gender. And in order to do that, we have 2 rounds of experts. The first round, a panel of practitioner experts, and we're going to go through them in a few minutes. And then we're going to take a few questions, and then we're going to move to our keynote and our expert panel. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. In the chat, you're welcome to make comments and chat with each other and make connections. I'm always amazed by how much goes in the chat. I can rarely keep up. Later in the webinar, we will be joined by the Executive Director of WHO's Health Emergency Preparedness and Response, Dr. Mike Ryan. And then we're going to have an opportunity to ask him some questions as well. So I don't want to delay anymore. I wanted to say thank you so much. Today is a day of celebration of what women and men have done for gender equity. It's a day to take stock, which is what we're doing, looking at the barriers to learning, particularly at the front line during emergencies. And third, it's a day to commit to taking action. So I hope we can turn this choose to challenge the barriers into concrete action following this. All right, so let's get started. To start our practitioner roundtable, I'd like to introduce you to 4 amazing people. And the first one is a colleague of mine, somebody I'm very honored to work with. She needs actually no introduction from me. Dr. Maria van Kerkhove is the unit head, Emerging Diseases, Zoonosis for WHO's Health Emergencies Program. But you know her in the daily press briefings and as the technical lead for our COVID response globally. She's an expert with a very strong bioscience background, master's in epidemiology, a PhD in infectious disease epidemiology. And before she joined us, she comes from the Pasteur Institute. She really exemplifies for me a female colleague who will not let barriers stand in the way. So welcome, Maria. It's such a pleasure to have you and you're, finding a slot in your busy career and day.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of these amazing women and men in this panel today.
So Maria, let's just dive in. So, I said, and everybody knows you are the technical lead for our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of your jobs behind the scenes has been to help develop and make sure there's quality to the guidance that WHO is putting out every day and the guidance that we're having to update. So, tell me, how important is it for you that we take these guidelines and we transform them into things that frontline practitioners can actually access?
So it's absolutely critical. Knowledge is power. Knowledge allows us to take that information and turn it into action. One of the things that WHO, that I'm really proud of WHO's ability to do in a situation like a pandemic is to pull together data and evidence. And we work with men and women all over the world. And given the fact that this pandemic has forced us to stop getting on planes for the most part and really turn on our digital platforms with high bandwidth, low bandwidth, we've been really able to reach a large number of individuals around the world, first to bring evidence to the table and look at how data turns into evidence, how evidence turns into guidance, how that knowledge turns into know-how, and that know-how turns into how-to. And women are a part of every single stage of that. Women are out there on the front lines, carrying out research. They're treating patients. They're going door to door and checking in on doing community health work. They're in the labs. They are in all of the shops and stores and keeping food on the table. They're moms. They're everywhere. And women have been part of the data generation. They've been part of our discussions as scientists and public health professionals as we discuss and debate and really push our understanding of what this virus is, how it spreads, the disease it causes. And they're part of how we write our guidance. And it's really important to have the female perspective in all of these different aspects, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a practical point of view. We work with women as part of patient groups, as part of civil society, how we review them. And then of course we take that guidance and we turn it into trainings. To be able to reach so many people around the world is something that we are constantly working on. We know that it's not perfect, but being able to have that information accessible to individuals and women all over the world, as you said, 70% of frontline workers are women. Being able to have it in the right languages so that it's not only out there on the web in terms of visuals, but people can actually read it and hear it and interact is absolutely, absolutely critical.
What are some of the barriers that you've either seen, experienced, or you've heard about that either challenge women to access? You talked about multilingual and making sure that people can reach it, but what challenges do you see that women have at the front line?
I mean, I think there's a lot of challenges that women have on the front line. I mean, part of it is access. Having information that is out there that no one can access is useless in that sense. We really need to get it into the hands of the people that need it most. And that's a challenge. So making sure that we not only provide information on, websites that people need a high bandwidth to be able to access, they need to be in different formats that can be downloaded. They need low bandwidth. Mm-hmm. We need them in different languages. And I think that's really critical. But the other thing for me, Gaia, is for women to contribute to the development process itself. So it's not about us at WHO, wherever we sit, whatever level of the organization, from HQ to our regional offices to our country offices, talking to people. We want to be talking with. And so what's really critical is that information feeds back into what we do so that it becomes more and more practical with each update that we have. So women need opportunities to be able to contribute to this, to all of the work that we do. So not only access, but also opportunities, because we need women to have a voice and a viewpoint and to actively contribute and to be listened to. So there are a lot of opportunities I see that women that contribute to what WHO does every day.
Thank you, Maria. And you touched on a really important point, because the statistics are quite dire in COVID-19. When you look at national COVID teams, the policy, the response teams, something like only 3.5% have gender parity. So, we're here talking about the front line, but actually even at national level, this remains to be a challenge. And we know that gains that we make in normal times are often lost during emergencies. Yeah. So I mean, really, what are your ideas about, leading the COVID-19 and creating this, an equitable COVID-19 world for men and women?
I think, Guy, we're all leaders in our own right, no matter what we do. I never thought I would be a leader in a global pandemic. So that to me is it's just even crazy, to hear you say something like that. I work with amazing WHO professionals all over the world, thousands of us all over the world. I have never been more proud to be WHO in my life. Proud to be WHE in our health emergencies program, and proud to be WHO. But all of us are leaders in everything that we do, whether, no matter what job you have, no matter what level within an organization you have an opportunity to be a leader. You lead by action and you contribute, but it comes down to opportunities. All of us need to provide opportunities for women and girls. And it's not just men that need to provide these opportunities, women need to provide these opportunities as well. We have, we're all daughters and we have fathers, we have sons, we have partners and mentors and colleagues. Everyone can contribute to our ability to be a leader in the situation that we're in. We're faced with challenges every single day. It's how we face those challenges and the opportunities that we have to work through them. So I see a lot of room for improvement in this area. And I hope that even in the trauma that we've had with this horrible pandemic over the last 15 months, that we find opportunities to support each other, to be those leaders that all of us actually are.
Thank you, Maria. We'll come back to you. And I'd like to just bring in our next speaker. Again, and somebody I'm very, very proud to introduce is Henni, who also works in the Health Emergencies team. She and I are colleagues. And in fact, she is the power behind our open source learning platform for health emergencies, Open WHO. Henni, you've worked in emergencies, you've worked in the field. You and I met during the Ebola response of 2016. What have you learned are the big barriers, particularly for women or women and men, to access information, particularly virtually?
Thank you, Guy. I'm really honored to be here on this very particular day for us all. And I really would like to bring the findings from the openwho.org platform that I run, together with amazing colleagues and colleagues such as Maria, who just spoke. Actually, the content producers are the powerhouses who actually produce the learning content for the world through OpenWHO platform. And what we've seen during the past 15 months is that our use case has largely changed. Before the pandemic, we had majority of male learners on the platform. Up to 70–80% of the learners in the platform were male, but now it's equal. We have, with the pandemic learning, we actually have equal numbers of men and women on the platform. And also when I look at those technical and science teams of WHO who are producing the content, I see almost every course producer, the content owner of the platform are female. So up to 85% of our course producers, those technical experts that are transferring their technical knowledge in WHO's guidance areas, in mandated areas, are actually female colleagues. This is a particular interesting small detail, but it tells of that empowerment that women want to give for the world through the online learning. And we've actually noticed these different use cases in the WHO, the increase of female learners on the platform. And just during the past 10 days, we took a snapshot survey to try and understand what type of barriers and enablers there are for learning through our platform or any online platform. And actually some of the findings are here behind me. And we had about 365 responders, majority female. 2 in 3 responders to our survey were women, majority from the Global South, and 2 in 3 responders were between 20 and 40 years of age. And when listing what are the really enabling factors to online learning, majority of the respondents said that the online accessible formats, free, open source, low bandwidth formats that we are hosting are actually the critical enabler for learning during this time when the pandemic has shut down the courses and continued education and face-to-face trainings and all other usual old normal forms of training. Also, the pandemic has really driven people's interest and time and chance to join the learning. So the pandemic has enabled people actually to start and come and learn in different formats, in particular in online format. And then the social support was really taken. Family, colleagues, supervisors have really supported learners so that they could spend time. On the challenge side, we saw that the time and cost were the key barrier for most learners on our platform. We don't ask for, our platform runs for free. So, but other for-cost platforms were particularly difficult, especially for female respondents on our platform. And digital access, reliability of the source, and the language were taken as the top barriers. And these are the kind of areas where we try and make WHO's credibility, materials in multi-formats. We are about to launch our 50th language on OpenWHO. So we try and come across all of these various barriers by providing free free access, low bandwidth, always within your fingertips materials that are in those languages of the people who need them the most. So very positive findings in terms of pandemic growing people's interest and ability to join learning, and also the online formats are really the ones that need to be there in order for everyone to ensure everybody's access to the learning everywhere. Thank you.
So Henni, you already talked about, how WHO is removing these barriers, but this really, I mean, I know we have nearly 5 million course registrations, but really there are millions and actually billions of people out there who need access. What in your mind, I mean, should we think about on International Women's Day about removing some of these barriers?
I think that the source credibility is actually striking very strongly, in particular for WHO, given the really science evidence-based knowledge that we are able to provide as World Health Organization. And this is something that is becoming more and more critical with the health information literacy being compromised in these social mass formats, and with the information touring around and not being, it's very difficult to really assess which is the most reliable and right source of information. So I think organizations like us, the Public Health Institutes, other science institutes, the information that we convey is of critical importance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Again, we'll come back. So really, you had two perspectives from the World Health Organization, and now we go out, we go beyond. And my next guest is Adam Nurudeen, and he is here in a way, he is living and he's a manifestation of the biases that we have, because Adam is a nurse, and there is a lot of bias against men entering the nursing profession. In fact, in healthcare, nursing is seen as a women's job, and surgery is seen as a male job. So it's really, I'm really grateful to have Adam here from Nigeria. He's not only a male nurse, he's also a young professional. He's a global health advocate and a young researcher in the fields of global health. And he has expertise in leadership, advocacy, professional organizations. I spoke to him before this, and I saw how passionate he was about helping people from remote communities, like the one he himself hails from. He's currently working in Abuja, and he's also the Nursing Now Young leader for Nigeria. So Adam, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Adam, so we've used this statistic a lot. Women make up 70% of the current health and social care workforce. And mostly they're nurses and midwives, particularly in the health system. And most nurses and midwives are female. They're at the front of COVID and other health emergencies, as you yourself have discussed with me. What are the barriers to learning that you yourself have witnessed as a nurse in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me in this important webinar. And I'm glad to be joining you today to be part of this great event. I'm happy to see all your faces. As a nurse in Nigeria, I have witnessed so many barriers to learning, one of which is lack of personal and professional development, training, and inadequate training due to lack of basic equipment and manpower. Moreover, there is poor research culture among the nurses in Nigeria, which prevents them from evidence-based practice due to changing disease patterns as seen by the emergence of new diseases, which eventually require new approaches to care. And also there is a resistance for nurses to be at the decision-making table and to act as policy makers to make decisions on issues concerning nursing education in Nigeria. Some are due to interprofessional conflicts. The conflicts may be between the Nigerian nurses and other healthcare practitioners in the country. This is also a major barrier for nurses to have equal access to learning just as other professionals do. So these are some of the challenges we're having. in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. So accessing learning and training is one thing, but actually because of the, if you like, the stereotype against the lower status of the nursing profession, if you like, that prevails. So there's actually lack of access to decision making and policy and changing the future. So it's very interesting. I know we spoke before once about the actual discrimination you have faced as a male nurse. Do you want to share that a little bit? How difficult it is for a man to be a nurse?
Okay, for a man to be a nurse, especially in Nigeria, or let me say in the northern part of Nigeria where I am currently practicing, is we have some cultural and religious issues that affect the practicing of male nurses in Nigeria. Like, I would like to share my experience while I was posted to work in ONG, the obstetric and emergency ward. According to the culture of a particular region, that is the northern part of Nigeria, a male nurse is not allowed to enter into the labor room, collect deliveries, or perform some kind of gynecological examinations to women in that department. So I took that as a challenge because the majority of the nurses we are having were females, and I happen to be the only male nurse posted there to work in labor. But so due to the culture of the people there, I find it difficult to practice. And I eventually had to leave that place because I cannot be allowed to be attending to women in that department. So these are some of the challenges we are facing.
Thank you, Adam. So, really just moving on to what we can do. So what opportunities do you think there are to create more equitable access to learning, professional growth for frontline health professionals, especially nurses and midwives?
Okay. There are increasing awareness and demand for academic qualifications for all health professionals, especially nurses, and also the new technology in the healthcare, which forces changes in approach to care. I think technology will provide a real opportunity to transform education for more equitable access for learning to all healthcare professionals.
Thank you so much. And then added to somehow shaping and participating in the policy making, obviously something that you talked about already. Great. So again, I'm sure if anybody has questions, just keep writing in the Q&A, not comments, questions, and I'll come back to my round table. If I may, I'd like to introduce you to Xavier. Xavier Mendin is a registered nurse. She works for a very interesting organization called Last Mile Health. She's calling in from Grand Bassam, Liberia today. She's a Last Mile Health country manager in Grand Bassam, Liberia. A registered nurse, she's a nurse like Adam, but she's also a public health professional with long experience, very senior experience in doing programming at the field level. She works with the county health team to implement the National Community Health Assistant Program, but really training frontline health workers. She obviously has a lot of clinical, but also program expertise working at Last Mile Health. During Ebola outbreak of 2014 in Liberia, she was a responder there. She has a strong background in community health systems, and she's particularly involved in recruitment, training, and management of community health workers. So welcome, Xavier.
Thank you so much, Kaya.
So
I'm very thankful to be here today. I mean, this is a great way to celebrate the International Women's Day. So I'm grateful to be part of this really important event.
So I agree with you. I think all celebrations are better when there are more of us together, and we certainly have a lot of people today to celebrate. So actually, I've been very impressed with Last Mile Health and how much effort and thought you put into training of healthcare workers, particularly at the front line. how have you yourself accessed learning and training in the past, and how is this different during COVID-19? Maybe look at Ebola and COVID-19. What's different?
Okay, thank you. That's a very important question. For myself, I've really done a lot of in-person training in the past when I really went to get my bachelor's degree in nursing. But I've also been able to access learning, ongoing professional development by of virtual means. So I've already had some of those experiences before the COVID-19. But now, since COVID-19 has been largely virtual, and like everything has to be online. And really in my setting where I live in Liberia, virtual learning too is not without its own challenges. We have issues around internet connectivity, and there are times we don't even have like electricity all of the time to really have power to power your computer or even your laptop, or your tablet, whatever electronic device you are using. So those are really some of the challenges, and really around accessing these learnings around these online and platform. When they have live sections, you need to stay out across these different time zones, and it can also be a challenge where you need to either wake up early in the morning or like stay up very late at night. So most times, in order to access education now, since the COVID, I have really spent a lot of time at the office to really be able to connect and have the needed resources to continue accessing these ongoing professional development opportunities. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, as someone who is a content manager for Last Mile Health, working closely with the government to really build out the community health workers and workforce, we do a lot of training. It requires a lot of training to really build out this workforce. And since the COVID-19 started, our training have not really varied too much because for us, really virtual training is not an option for our community health workers. They live in remote communities, they don't have the resources, they don't have internet, there's no way to connect online. And so we continue to do our training in person, but most times, all the times, rather, we prioritize safety. We ensure that people are consistently wearing their masks and they are adhering to all the social distancing protocols. And so we also do this training in smaller groups. We don't bring people in larger groups like in the past. So those are some of the different approaches that we've taken. And so even though the virtual or online kind of like training is not an option for us, we continue to find these different ways to make sure that the community health workers, they have the requisite training they need to continue to provide services to the people in the various communities where they live, while they also keep safe at that. So those are some of the ways that our training for community health workers have really evolved slightly since the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. So actually that's really interesting, because most of us who are in training have had to really make the shift from face-to-face to online. But then there is a host of challenges behind that. I mean, I was very upset. For me, this has been a journey. For the last year and a half, we've been looking at developing a learning strategy for health. And one of the things that really shocked me was that, yes, there are millions of people who don't have access to internet. But if you are in Africa, and if you're a woman in Africa, first of all, you are 10 percentage points less than a man in the same situation to have access to broadband internet. So always in every country, women are about 10%, particularly in low and middle income countries. So they don't have it. Even if the courses like the ones we offer in WHO are free, what happens is people have to pay for data. Right, Xavier? So that's a choice, right? Do I buy medicine? Do I pay for food, or do I buy data? And often the educational materials take up a lot of data, right? And then you really talked about, if particularly women are going to do this on top of your job and childcare. I know you are a mother like me, and I thought I had a tough time having a job and children, but for you, it must be even more challenging. What are the the real, the things that really concern about the barriers that women particularly face? I know you've talked about many of them, but what one really makes you upset?
Yeah, and that's a very, really important question, because in our work at Last Mile Health, we also continue to see these barriers that are facing women. So, for example, in Liberia, we have 4,000 community health workers across the country nationally. But then when you look at the percentage of women, we have under 20% of them being women. So what are the barriers? And we continue to really learn what are the barriers, what are the reasons for which we don't see a lot of women coming forward to really participate in this kind of unique program that really requires women participation. And so over time, we've learned that cultural expectation is a factor, because mostly in the setting, especially in the remote communities, women are required to stay home, take care of their families, take care of their homes, take care of their children. And so that is a huge barrier in itself. And I think even me, it's really something that a lot of other women can relate to across the world. And I also relate to that, because over the past time, trying to acquire an ongoing education, take care of my family, and balance a full-time career has really been challenging for me. It has really been exhausting for a lot of the time, and I had to find ways to balance that. So I also think that a lot of women are also having these kind of experiences, and it also keeps us behind. Another thing that we've also learned, and it's very interesting, is that women themselves in this remote community, especially with our community health workers and recruitment process, we see that the women themselves are also straining themselves out of the role. Like at the outset, they say, I don't have that training, so I don't want to go there. So that confidence is also like a problem. We say, okay, we need to have everything, we want to know everything before we put ourselves for. So we've been seeing that over time. But notwithstanding, as we work with the government of Liberia to look at policy revisions and all of that, we are also making sure that we can make these recommendations to address some of these barriers and to change some of our recruitment practices and really, the kind of practices we employ when we are doing training, so we can really have an inclusive and really good space that will bring forth both men and women into the program.
So you really make an excellent point. I mean, I was reading over the weekend that the contribution of women across the world to the gross global product, the output, the economic output of the world is about 3.5 trillion US dollars. But about half of that is unpaid. Okay. And then, we know even when women are contributing at community level, they, as you say, they're not coming forward to be formally trained and employed as community health workers, but because of other things that are keeping them there, they are contributing voluntarily, without any status, without any proper training. So really interesting. And you're linking again to Adam's point about, how can we engage about these at the policy level, not just at the community level or women's individual level. So really interesting conversation. I was wondering, if after this round, if the four of you, the four speakers so far, what are you thinking about? What are you hearing from each other? Henni, what idea from the other speakers really resonated with you?
This is witness on the technology enhanced learning. It's the future way to go, but not setting aside any of the other face-to-face formats and those more close mentorships and learning skills with one another. But I think it is really the one positive thing out of this pandemic is that we've managed to work digitized together, like just now, like this session, all across the world. We are able to come together in a session like this. So I think there is a big advantage and promise when we do it really trustworthy, equitable in an equitable way, and so that everybody can have an access. But I'm really inspired by the colleagues, speakers from Liberia and Nigeria here, really showing how the work works on the front line of the various responses that are there in the health emergencies.
Thank you so much. Adam, there are lots of questions that people are very interested when you talked about the barriers. What are you taking away from what your fellow speaker said? What thing resonates most with you? If you unmute, Adam. Great, go ahead.
I'm actually interested in the statistic given by the Henni Utinen. Looking at the way we are having some kind of improvement in the responders, some of the women responding to learning and barriers they are having. The data is actually fascinating, and we learn a lot from that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I totally agree, because we in WHO were somewhat puzzled why it was mainly men accessing this learning. And then the pandemic happens, and then we have more and more women accessing it. Maria, what are your thoughts on your fellow speakers? Lots of really sort of profound points are being raised.
A lot of really profound points. I think one of the things that resonates with me is to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table and as part of the discussion, as part of the development of all of these materials, and not just the recipients. And women need to be part of all of that, men and women, from all over the world. I think, you know, we sometimes get, we have our networks around the world, and this pandemic has shown us how we can expand those and we can have a much further reach, not just even at national levels, but at subnational levels, at the practitioner level. And I think the more we can do that, the more women's voices that can be part of that will really make us better. And that evidence-based, that credibility that you were talking about, Henni, you know, making sure that it's not just, you know, scientific papers, but it's the practicalities of what we do. And I think that will make everything stronger. So everyone, you know, especially women, need a seat at the table. And we as an organization can work even harder to make sure that that becomes a reality.
Thank you. Xavier, you know, during like Ebola, and even more actually, during COVID, a lot of new knowledge is coming out of the practice that happens at the field level, right? So as Henni said, it's, and Maria said, it's not just here is something that is global knowledge, take it and run with it. Practitioners are part of that. How do you see people at the front line contributing to the generation of knowledge and the participation of women in that aspect?
I think in our work, we've tried as much as possible to do a lot of community engagement activities that helps us to really get feedback from the community, from the end users, and really use that perspective to really inform some of our program designs and shape the way we implement. So for example, some of these trainings that we do that it's very supposed to be done virtually. We can do that because we understand the concept, so what will be able to work and what can work. And it's a form that interaction, that kind of way that we get closer to the community to really do that engagement and understand what we really use. And so and I have really benefited from the WHO platform. Also, I go there and look at these guidelines and look at most of these updated information accounts of just for my own learning. And so that is really good. And really like taking those and kind of like slightly adapting them to the country-wide protocols also is very helpful. So for our work, mostly we really generate information and from like gather the perspectives of our people through the community engagement exercises. That's one of the main ways.
Thank you, Xavier. I wanted to bring a little story in from our last webinar. So actually there was a doctor, a young female doctor, Dr. Mona, who was recruited to work in a new hospital in Somaliland. And an NGO, a foundation, built this hospital because there was no health facility for a population of, I think it was between 700,000 and 1 million. They didn't know how many because there were a lot of nomadic communities there. And so there was no hospital, so they built a hospital. There were no healthcare workers, so they hired people, including Dr. Mona. Then they realized there was no COVID information in their language. And so they got in touch with us. We translated some of the core courses, Maria, some of your courses into the local language. And that was done free of charge by another third party, a private company that wanted to do some social good. And then we had this amazing story of they had everything and then they had no internet. So they had to go and figure out a Wi-Fi tower. So you see, like, from layer to layer, from step to step, how these barriers, if somebody hadn't put all of those pieces together, there would be no knowledge. And they realized when they did the courses on infection prevention control that they didn't actually have basic knowledge of infection prevention control. So they had to go 2-3 steps back. So really, I think what we don't know is what we're trying to unravel today. Because yes, we can be very proud there's gender parity at leadership in certain organizations, or we see women heads of state running great pandemic responses, but actually it's those without a voice whom we've heard about today that's really important. So without me getting on my high horse, because you're not here to listen to me, can I invite the audience to write in the chat a word or a short phrase that for you summarizes what you have heard and what you're thinking? Just very quickly, and we will take a little breather and then we're going to start the next round. So one word or a phrase that for you summarizes what we've been discussing so far. Innovation, keep going, and panelists are allowed to write too as well. Powerful, they're saying. It's a challenge. Access. Our time is now. I'm assuming time for action. Progress. Empowerment. Women need a seat at the table. Equity. Resilience. Clarion call. Some of it's going so fast I can't. Encouragement. Uniformity in training. Intersectionality. And actually there are questions on how we can address this intersectionally, because we look at equity for health. Then we look at equity for education. So how are we bringing those together, but not from outdated, here is your academic degree, but from lifelong education, continued professional, women inclusion, diversity, lots, opportunity, precious, progressive, fighting together. Okay, on that, I think we could continue the fight to the next phase. Please, all speakers, just stay on. We're going to have another round. And this round is our panelists. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a similar process. We're going to talk, we're going to have a conversation. And at the end of that, all the speakers will be invited to speak as well. So to start the panel, I'm really, really pleased. One of the reasons I love these webinars is I get to meet extraordinary men and women. And somebody's very, very inspiring I met is Dr. Anjali. Dr. Anjali, you are there. Anjali Bohade from India. She's the founder of something called the Disha Foundation and leading NGO working in the areas of migration and development in India. She has qualifications in social work, a master's in public health, but really, and a PhD degree in population health. But really what's really important is she's brought all of these together around urbanization, rural and tribal migration, livelihood, urban health and development issues. And for the last 20 years, she's also been engaged in research. She's worked and supported the work of organizations like WHO, UNIFEM, UNICEF, UNESCO, UNDP, and others. And she has provided expertise for our own regional office in the Southeast Asia region. Dr. Anjali, I'm really, really pleased to welcome you. You've worked obviously with women who are at even higher levels of risk, vulnerability, and these are migrants and migrant women. What in your experience hinders migrant women from accessing information and learning?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Daya, for inviting me to this outstanding panel. I wish Happy International Women's Day to all the panelists and all the participants. Thanks for our brief introduction. We at Disha Foundation are working with internal migrant workers in India for almost 2 decades now, and particularly for improving their access to healthcare, education, legal services, and social security programs. Migrants are vulnerable, and among them, migrant women are especially vulnerable. And due to COVID situation, their vulnerability has almost doubled. So there are underlying barriers to access the education and learning, which cause the increased susceptibility to serious negative health outcomes for migrant women during COVID pandemic. We identified 3 barriers which affected women's, especially migrant women's access to learning. The first one is information, language, and communication barriers, which are some of the earlier panelists have already discussed. The gendered cultural norms and the stigma associated with the seeking care. The cultural barriers we identified, which were generally related to gender, including information barriers and stigma, which is largely due to the low health literacy. During COVID times, most of the information was disseminated via digital sources, either TV or mobile phones, as already earlier panelists have discussed. And most of the women, the migrant women, do not have access to such information sources due to limited economic capacity, which reduces their access to mobile phones and internet, and also their inability to use phones due to low literacy or even the cultural barriers limiting their access to mobile phones. We also noticed there were some legal barriers which were stemming from the local laws during the COVID times, particularly the state-to-state travels, etc., which also affected migrant women's health. So these were some of the barriers, which hindered women's access to learnings during the COVID time, as per our observation.
So what did you have to do differently? I mean, you're already working with vulnerabilities, but during COVID-19, what did you do differently so that women could somehow, have access to reliable information and so on?
Sure. So we noticed migrant women were not aware about their rights and entitlements, and even the very basic information about the COVID, how to safeguard themselves, the protective measures, etc. We also noticed migrants themselves were united and formed their own groups to support each other during this time. So we reinforced such migrant groups by directly approaching them and spreading the awareness and imparting information. And we tried to use all the alternative modes to do that. So in order to do this faster in a scalable and sustainable way, we developed a digital mobile application named Shram Gaurav, which means labor with dignity, which became a one-stop platform for disseminating information and awareness. And to our surprise, we got excellent response from the migrants to the newly developed mobile application for their support. Those who didn't have any access to internet or smartphones, they form up the groups in their vicinity with those who have access and avail our support services through these groups. We also found that many women also formed such groups to access our mobile application. So that was very, very encouraging and heartening to see.
Yeah. So it's interesting you talk about, yes, one is digital access, but the other is, being able to use devices, and luckily, you've helped them with this app. I was really in a formal conversation with the International Telecommunications Union. We heard that in their research, it wasn't just the gender differential in access to digital technology, but there were also problems of people not being able to use their mobile devices for learning. So they knew how to use it for WhatsApp or messaging, but they didn't really understand that. So that was actually seen as a gap that in health literacy, we have to teach digital literacy as well. Let me ask you, we often keep governments responsible, for gender and so on. But we know that NGOs have been at the forefront of any fight for equity. Really. So how is it, what have you learned about how to influence governments and powers that be for addressing vulnerability during COVID, particularly related to, women accessing information and training?
Sure. So I would say NGOs ideally have the ear on the ground and are more in touch with the real world issues. I mean, not just with the migrants, we are working with migrants, but any NGO for that particular case. So NGOs can provide direct help and support to women in the form of increasing their awareness, access to health education, and assistance in accessing these services, health or for that matter, any services in the places where they may feel alienated. So making women empowered through knowledge, their economic support, and providing hand-holding support so that women can be more in charge of their health is the basis of creating healthy families. And I truly believe the road to universal health coverage cannot be traveled without improving the health of women and especially migrant women. Going back to your particular question about how how to bring government on board, particularly to address the vulnerabilities of uh, migrants or any particular or any other vulnerable group, I would say. We had great experience during COVID times in India, and being an advocate for migrants' health, uh, during this time, I also felt that there was a positive side. There was a positive side to COVID epidemic as well, and the government was really wanted to do something very urgent and something concrete to support the migrant workers. And we were very happy and we were very privileged to directly work with government at local, state, and even at national level. And kind of a, any advocate organization's dream come true situation was there. Uh, Along with the government, we could develop the National Migration Data Repository during this time. Ministry of Tribal Affairs came forward and they set up a National Migration Support Portal. And they also developed information training manual for migrant workers, basically to empower and make them educate on their rights and entitlements, whether they are at their source level or at the destination during the pandemic time. And it was not just in a booklet form, but as we discussed, it also came in a digital form, in a video form in local languages. Okay. So currently it is in Hindi language, but that can be translated in future in multiple languages.
Thank you so much. Really interesting. And I wanted to raise a figure here. There are an unprecedented 70.8 million people who have fled their homes due to internal issues or cross borders as refugees. So really, this is not a small group that one or two NGOs can work with. So really, we've heard in refugee settings, particularly in humanitarian settings, how these discriminations, biases pile up. So it could be gender, it could be education, it could be race, it could be economic status, and then multiply and they stack up. So thank you very much for shedding light on that. Let's move on to another colleague of mine. I'm really, really proud to introduce Dr. Rosseline Belizer. She's originally from Haiti, but I got to know her because she became quite legendary in the Ebola outbreak response in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And she's one of our most senior frontline leaders in that. And having been to Democratic Republic of Congo and in this beautiful but complex country, what she went through was actually really, really tough. She's been, in health for the last 15 years. She's also a specialist in family medicine. And of course, as her current jobs show, she really has community at that center of her service. Her service during Ebola in DRC has been acknowledged at the highest levels of global health and our organization. And she really is an inspiration to all of us. I train many people who work in emergencies, but Rosseline is very, very special. And what she brought to female leadership at the front line is very unique. Currently, she is calling in from the Central African Republic, where she's WHO's responsible officer for preparedness and the international health regulations. Rosseline, welcome. I'm really, really happy to see you. So let's go back to your complex Ebola response in DRC last year, and now you're in CAR. What barriers have you personally observed that women and local community, particularly women in local community, have access to learning, training, and education?
Thank you, Gaia, for giving me the floor, and also thank you for this opportunity to take part to this wonderful webinar. So happy International Women's Day to all of us, and also to those men with us on this webinar. So when I came first to Sierra, I was really impacted by the literacy rate and the difference between men and women. You can see that the literacy rate in men is 48.7 for men with age group of 15 to 60, while it is only 28% for women in the same age group. So the first barrier I observe in this wonderful country is that the gender approach is not fully integrated in national educational policy, because there are still cultural parameters which lead parents to invest more in boys' education. Mm-hmm. There is a community belief that a girl vocation is to be married with a man who will take care of her, while the boy is the one who will provide benefit to the family. So you can see that this situation created another barrier, which is exacerbated by an important number of early pregnancy in teenagers as, of course, a result of early marriage that we have in this community. I also observe poverty as a major barrier. Women at the bottom of the social hierarchy. There is also a lack of infrastructure in Sierra. They only have one university, which is in the capital, Bangui, of course. So parents send a boy to the capital to pursue their studies, while girls should stay in the community to perform traditional tasks. So I should also mention the political military crisis these past 20 years. And so this situation has negatively affected changes for girls and women to access learning, training, and education, because the situation forced parents to keep their girls at home in order to prevent them against rape and sexual abuse.
Thank you. Those are really serious barriers that make us all stop and think. So, you know, when we were having a conversation earlier, you were also talking about things like, you know, marital status. So let's assuming, you know, that women are somehow able to become literate. I mean, the figure of only 28% literacy in this area for women, it's just shocking in 2021. And then second, you know, let's say they jump through all of those barriers. So what are some of these other tribal and social things that you know, I know you're very passionate about talking.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think, for example, in some health emergencies, while responding, we spend the first 3 months, okay, of the response to train local trainers. Those local trainers, there are more than 75% of male, because after the training, they should go community from community to train other local responders. This is, for example, the importance of when we see that the tribal, this has an impact on women access to education. This is the case of the Nande tribe in DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, in the province of Northern Kivu, where those women are linked with the men by what we call the customary law. This customary law imposes a framework to limit movement and action of the women, married women. So women only have to do, household and take care of our children. In other hand, we have also the Batwa women. The Batwa women are very marginalized because they are what we call hunter-gatherers. They are living in the forest. They don't have, permanent household. So they are moving from a camp to a camp in the forest. So there is no way that we can have them to access those trainings. So this is also some social and cultural barriers that we observe in the field of emergencies.
Thank you, Marissa, because I think, you know, what we don't appreciate when we don't really understand when we hear of Ebola, we will say, why is it so difficult to bring something under control? Unless we understand this socio-cultural context. So women may not be able to participate in getting knowledge, but they are in the household giving care, where they are actually driving without knowing it, the you know, the epidemic or the disease outbreaks. So I think these are really very difficult issues. So on the one hand, I can hear all of us talking about how women need access to health, education, social services, right? But on the other hand, women have agency. We are part of an outbreak or the response to an outbreak. So there are two things. And I think in this webinar, what we're really trying to dig down to is that. So we say we want to empower women because women are part of it and they have agency. And yet there are additional barriers to women. Mary Rosseline, I mean, it's something we don't like to talk about, I know, but I think I would be amiss if I don't ask you this. I know particularly where that outbreak was particularly there was a lot of violence. There were particularly towards women. So, I mean, is there anything that you want to add on that without distracting from what we're saying, how that impacts how women will leave the house and learn?
Yes, exactly. These responses were very complicated and complex with several security threats that have affected directly the response team. So you can see that as a result, we have a lot of local responders that have abandoned the response because they have to run away with their family to save their lives. We have also the case where some women express clearly their fear by being a part of the response team because they become a target. They become more exposed to violence, to physical and mental violence in the community. We have some women that express us that they cannot stay in the community that they are working with us because it's that they become against the community and they become the allies of the international community. This situation can expose them. So when we are making the training, this is difficult for them to come and to access and to participate clearly because sometimes we can make some information materials. We cannot have a photo with them. This is a very complicated situation because in the same case, we have to protect them and not to expose them in those information and material that we are producing. I have to say that.
Go ahead.
Yes, and that women, even though women have been the cornerstone of this outbreak and response in DRC, yet it was difficult to maintain the gender balance in the response team. But so far, I think women has been in the heart of this response, and women have been the most affected by this outbreak. This outbreak has affected women in the way that are very, very difficult to fathom.
Thank you, Mary Rosseline. Lots of really, and for me, I'm thinking of many great women who worked in DRC, locals that we've trained and so on. Thank you. So for me, you know, this access to education is most vulnerable in some of these areas we're talking about, you know, migrants, refugees, communities and women at the front line in emergencies. But we go back to this statistic of nurses, midwives, who are the backbone of health systems, health delivery, and yet they continue to be faced by an amazingly persistent number of challenges. And to talk about this, it is my pleasure to introduce WHO's first ever chief nursing officer. We did not have a chief nursing officer before Elizabeth Iro was appointed. She is really a groundbreaking, she's in a groundbreaking role, but she's also an extraordinary person. She's been with us for about 3 years and she comes from the Cook Islands where she served as her country's Secretary of Health. And I think she was the first nurse midwife to be appointed in such a high profile health role, which is usually, I apologize, Elizabeth, as a doctor, which is dominated usually by doctors. She's done work at strategic level. She's represented, she's been the president of the Cook Islands Nurses Association. And she brings with her to WHO her particularly unique way of trying to change the system and engage not just people who are working now, but people whom we need for the future, such as young professionals. Elizabeth, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you. So I wanted to start, with this well-known fact that nurses and midwives are mainly women, and they deliver health to communities and patients, but within a framework usually controlled, designed by men. There was even a provocative publication I read, Delivered by Women, Led by Men, Healthcare. So how does this affect how access to knowledge, training, education happens in a crisis like COVID?
Thank you very much for the invitation to be a part of this panel, and happy International Women's Day to all the panelists and all the participants who've been able to log into this webinar. Yes, of course, nursing and midwifery remains a highly gendered profession with associated biases in the workplace. Approximately 90% of the nursing and the midwifery workforce is female, but also a few leadership positions in healthcare held by nurses or women. I think, what's also really important is to answer this question is when there is a gender blindness that exists, nurse and midwife leaders are not included in the planning and the development of policies to ensure appropriate trained workforce. For the places where it is actually needed, failures are likely to be experienced because of the poor selection of the candidates, the training, inappropriate training curricula, failure to recruit for and retain personnel in rural areas. So I think that these are really critical agenda items. Because sadly, we heard from Adam, female nursing is a female majority professions. Many countries are given low social value, status, and pay. Now, this has implications, I feel, for accessing training and education, such as leadership training programs that might be cost prohibitive. And limited accessing training programs in response to the COVID-19 crisis outside of work hours may also be prohibitive for many women, as when they leave their place of employment, they take up their non-paid responsibilities in the home, and so does not maybe have the time to access these training programs. But I think I'm particularly pleased to hear Henni talk about the number of women and men that are accessing the WHO apps resources. I think that's really fantastic, but I think there are still some limitations and I suppose restrictions. If these trainings are not offered during the work hours, I think it's a barrier for many women. Yeah, just going a little bit further, again, COVID-19 precautions present particular challenges to educating nurses and midwives, as most institutions are forced to rethink how they deliver courses, content safely and remotely. There's been some real work done with our partners in the WHO Collaborative Centers for Nursing and Midwifery, and country offices as well as within headquarters and regional offices around supporting this work going forward. Because we know clinical now also need to incorporate how future health professionals utilize the technologies to provide telehealth and communicate through their virtual platform as opposed to in-person. I think there's also a documented gap in the capacity of the education and
The sound is not very good for some reason, Elizabeth.
training institutions in terms of the number.
Yeah. The sound is very. Yeah. So let me just ask you one more question. On this day, on International Women's Day, women leaders like yourself, what will you choose to challenge in this area of barriers to access to information and learning for women? And what are you most optimistic about?
I suppose for me, what I would choose to challenge is decisions about nursing and midwifery that are made without nurses and midwives being present. I think it would be my key kind of agenda here. Because I think, investment in nursing and midwifery education, faculty, in infrastructure and students to meet the domestic demand and to respond to changing technologies, as I said before, and the changing health needs of the country is critical.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think the COVID-19 actually has revealed the pre-existing inequalities that nursing and midwifery has experienced, and also the shortage prior to COVID-19 in many countries. So I think, as I said, the development.
Great, thank you. The sound is not so clear with you, Elizabeth, so I'll just stop for a moment. And it's also a good moment to welcome Dr. Mike Ryan, who's the Executive Director for the World Health Organization for Emergency Preparedness and Response. You know him, he's now a global television personality. I make light of this, but really he has an extremely challenging agenda and schedule, and I'm so happy that he was able to join us even at the tail end of this webinar. Mike, I've already sent you some information about the wonderful speakers that we have today. We've talked about everything from the obvious things that are challenges to accessing information and education during emergencies, from language to digital access, but we really went, as Marie Rosseline and others and Anjali from Migrants and others talked about, some of these cultural, really strong barriers that are realities for women in many countries. And we touched a little bit on how, although women are contributing a great deal to the emergency response work, they really have many things that we need to address. So Mike, what would you like to say on International Women's Day 2021?
Thanks, Gaia. Well, the first thing is, yes, I've become a minor celebrity in my old age, as my mother says, and a legend in my own lunchbox. So it certainly puts me on my place. Thanks for your kind invitation, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. And it's good that we make a fuss on this day, but we need to be making a fuss every day. This is just one opportunity for us to recognize the great work done by women in health and public health. And I see one of my heroes online, Rosseline. Bonjour. And Maria van Kerkhove, and God knows there's probably lots of others. That's what I can see. And Henni. So I probably can end my speech there and just hand over to the three ladies and say, go for it. Because one of the things I certainly have had the honor to do, and that is work side by side with some of the most impressive professionals, female professionals as they happen to be, and knowing the journeys that all of my female colleagues have been on, and knowing that journey is longer, harder, more difficult, more full of obstacles than the one I've been on, makes their achievements all the more laudable, but also means that even our female colleagues who are working at the highest level still face those challenges. The glass ceiling isn't just in one place, Gaia. The glass ceilings exist everywhere. And in fact, often the higher you move in the system, the greater the prejudices that occur. And the more that the norming and the prejudices affect decision-making. Because as you move higher in the system, the difference between people and the perception of their talent, it becomes narrow and narrower. As you get better and better, it's like getting promoted as an athlete in football. You go up and up, and the margins become tighter and tighter for those promotions and for that professorial job or that director job. So anything that takes away that margin for a woman beyond the professional is, I think, probably causing more and more. So we have this idea that we've progressed and everything is fine now. Well, it's not, because there are still significant barriers right the way through the system. I think we probably need to recognize that the problem has been recognized, but to understand that the problem has not been addressed. So it's great to see everyone recognizing the issue, and it's great to see some movement, but we're nowhere close on that. And it's an important day. We all should be celebrating this day. This is not just a day for women to celebrate women. I think this is a day for us all to celebrate gender and our diversity, be it in gender or sexuality or race or class or whatever we want to say. And in that sense, this day is representational of all of that, but also to recognize that some of the ugly realities of our world is that half of humanity is confronted by barriers every day that didn't emerge by themselves. Those barriers were built, they were constructed, and they've been engineered in many ways to prevent half of our society making the progress it should make based on talent and based on ability. And we've created barriers large and small, and sometimes I think it's the little barriers that must drive you all mad, not the big barriers. We can all see them and fight them, but it's the little stuff, the 1,000 little things that happen every day. As Maria, we've experienced, you get called Mrs. and I get called Doctor. I can't tell you the number of meetings we've been in, where I'm automatically Doctor and someone like Maria is automatically Madame. It's like, what? Maria, you and I have exchanged some WhatsApps during some of those meetings, just going, what the hell? And while we can laugh about it, I think it does represent a sense of where we are. When I look around the COVID-19 leadership team in HQ and in WHO and beyond that at the regional offices, and I look to the number of women who are leading in each and every one of the spaces of this response, and yet it's not necessarily recognized so much. But 70% of the health and social workforce are women. I think, is it maybe less than a quarter of senior leadership roles are women. So there's a huge inversion of that pyramid. Women, because of that service, are in the front line of COVID response, and we all talk about the heroes, but some heroes get paid more than other heroes apparently, and women still within the health workforce have lower wages than men for the same work. Women in general, and if we go beyond the health system in general, contribute so much to the, this wonderful word of gross domestic product, what the output of a society is. Yet, half of that output goes unrecognized and unpaid by society, particularly the work that women do within society in caring and in other roles. We've talked about the bias and some of the sort of gender norms and stereotypes that are within the health force and within medicine and within science in general. But, it goes beyond that. I think women have and continue to experience sexual harassment, abuse and exploitation, even within that service in the workforce. It's not just the idea of people are just miscultured in a way or don't fully understand how to behave around women. And sometimes I think that gets reduced down to a set of behaviors that you must display in order to demonstrate that you're a new man or a new person, and not something that's deeply embedded in our behaviors and in our instinctive responses to a multi-gender, multiracial work environment. And it's something we really, really have to work at. And the idea that there are some people who are really good at this and there are some people that are really bad at this, I think this is something you have to work at every single day in your life. It is just not something that's ever done. You've got to constantly be aware of the biases and the prejudices that can enter anyone's thinking. And that's not just men or women, it's both. And I must say, I have experienced in my time some of my female colleagues who have very stereotypic views of other female colleagues, which I find all the more surprising given that they've been through that experience. I heard the head of the IMF the other day in an interview talking about her first interview to become a lawyer or at a law firm. And she was basically told by the prospective female employer that she didn't have it easy, and she was sure as hell going to make sure that Madame Lagarde wasn't going to have it easy either. You know, it was almost a threat, and it was very interesting that one of her first experiences of that sort of gendered stereotypic behavior didn't come from a man, it came from a female colleague. So it's everywhere in that sense. I think the disadvantages that sometimes are there for women in the workplace, particularly in the health workplace, is that it's multiplied by other barriers like race and like class. You put the three together and it's a perfect storm. If you're a working class woman of color, then you have some serious problems in trying to progress within a health system or a health workforce. And therefore we can't deal with one and not these other issues. We can't deal and say, yeah, we'll fix that and then we'll fix the other. That's not an option for a lot of women, and a lot of women listening in here today. I suppose the worst outcome of all of this, beyond the inequality and beyond what you all have suffered in your careers, is just the devastating loss of output and talent and stuff we could have done if we'd just not been so inefficient. It's just bloody inefficient to work this way, not to extract the most talent and the most output and the most creativity out of half our workforce, more than half our workforce as it happens in health. So we have not properly exploited or leveraged all of the outputs we could have got from what represents 70, 80% of all the people that work in the health system. And that just, to me, is just plain bad management. It's not just bad manners, it's bad management. And I think we have to start looking at that managerially and saying that's just inefficient. We shouldn't be at that. It's just silly. I like the seminar series. I think Learning Saves Lives. I think we spoke about that before, Gaia and Henni, and we've been on in the public domain talking about it. I love the concept. I think because it focuses on that issue of learning as a broader concept around education and training and communication, but more importantly, that it focuses on what we're trying to do through learning, and that saves lives. It's not learning to make me a nicer person or a better person. It's not learning to make me a better manager, although I hope it does. It's learning to do something, and that is to save lives. And every one of us contributes to that, be it at the policy or research or front end or training. We all contribute at some point. Somebody's life is better, longer, happier, more fulfilled, healthier, because we did something today about it. And it doesn't matter what you did, we all contribute to that. And if we see that learning as a life path for ourselves within the health system, as individuals and as groups, we need to learn as individual professionals, but we also need to learn as teams. We need to learn as groups, as programs. And I think that ability to learn together is something that's under-recognized at times, as opposed to just purely been on an individual journey of learning. But I do think, again, it's something where access to learning becomes in itself something that's about fairness. Because if we have all learned in our lives, and we are all privileged, many of us on this call, because we've had access to learning, and we know the difference that makes. I had a free education. I was given a free education by my state. I'm the son of a widowed mother, and at 11 years of age, we had nothing. In another country, I don't know what I've been now, but I was in a country that gave me access to learning. I think we need to recognize that not having access to learning is one of the greatest barriers to individual and community resilience and development. The problem is that it's gendered in that access, and that's a huge problem. And it's a huge problem in medicine, in health, and it's a huge problem in society in general. Again, the stuff that Open WHO has done around multilingual learning, again, is about opening up that access. It's all about access. It's all about the more languages we have, the more different formats we have, the more that people who may lack access for any number of reasons that we can't do anything about right now, but we provide as many channels as we can, as many openings as we can, while we try to fight some of the structural barriers to access. Because we can all say we'll wait around until someone fixes rights and access. The problem is the world doesn't work like that. It's going to take a long time for some of the structural barriers within governments and societies to be removed. That doesn't mean we can't do something about it. I was on a call the other night with some activists around equity and vaccine equity. We were having quite the storming argument. And I said, you know, we have to be constructively disruptive. We need to disrupt the current systems. We do not wish to accept the status quo. But in doing that, we have to be constructive and produce solutions. Disrupting things for the sake of it, just breaking something for the sake of it, doesn't do any good for anybody. But being a disruptor who's able to think through, how can I deliver a solution while disrupting this status quo, which I don't like, I don't accept it. But I'm not just going to wave a flag. I'm not just going to be in the something must be done club. I'm actually we're going to do something about it club. And I think that's what, you know, learning and what the Open WHO is all about. Just breaking those barriers and creating more channels for learning to leak through into people's lives, despite the barriers that they face. And be those barriers race, be those barriers income, be those barriers gender. Anyway, I'm not going to rabbit on too much more, Gaia. It's just, I just finally say that, you know, it's International Women's Day for you all. And I'm in awe at those female colleagues I have around me, and there are many, at your resilience and your creativity and your honesty and the way in which you have remained unembittered through some things that would have, you know, I don't know if I could have experienced the things that many women have experienced and be as productive and be as open and be as positive as so many of you are. And I think for me, it's a privilege and an honor to work with so many strong female scientists in the work we do here. But also to celebrate that equality and sameness are not the same. Equality for me does not mean saming everything, you know? It's about bringing those uniquely female qualities to the work we do. So we actually have, you know, a world in which it's not about making women the same as men. It's bringing the female view of the world and sensibility and unique creativity to the work we all do, and doing it in a way that is equal. And the last thing I will say, I sent a message to you, Guy, in response to your International Women's Day greetings to the staff, when I said I wanted to extend my wishes in the spirit of equality. But I then checked myself and said, yes, in the spirit of equality, because right now that's all we can say, because we haven't delivered on the reality of equality. And I will say that to you all again, to commit myself and the program and all of us who work in health, and particularly us male leaders and female leaders, that we now need to clear the path for the next generation of female leaders in health. We need to disrupt the system. We need to create the opportunities. I don't think any young female professional needs a hand up. They don't need a helping hand. I think at one stage my daughter said to me, you just need to get out of our way, you know, and and I think that's the best lesson you could ever learn. I think we just need to get out of the way of young, talented professional women in the health force. Stop putting up the barriers, stop blocking and tackling people, and women are well capable of making their own way. We don't need to be paternalistic, saying, we have to create these other systems in order to help women along the line. It's so disempowering for someone to have to come along and say, can I help you? I'll tell you a very funny story. The most humiliating moment in my whole life was going skiing for the first time and literally sliding down the hill on my bum and rolling over and ending up buried in 2 feet of snow. And these little aliens, otherwise known as 6-year-old kids on skis, came over and skied over to me and said to me in French, est-ce que je peux vous aider, monsieur? Can we help you, mister? Right? And the humiliation of having these young creatures offering to assist me was the final nail in my humiliation. And I say that in a funny way to end maybe on a humorous note. But I don't honestly believe that the women I have worked with through my career don't need help from anybody. What they need is opportunity. And they need equality. That doesn't mean assistance. And I've worked in the field. I've worked in Geneva, worked everywhere else. I've seen you, Mary Rosseline, in the field. And I tell you what, I wouldn't like to be getting in your way. And the same, Maria, I wouldn't like to be getting in your way either. And we need this new generation of female leaders to shine, as you all shine. So many of you shine. I don't know, Henni, how many times you've gone back and forth on that ferry to Finland and kept doing your job and managing your family and doing all of the other things you do. And so many of you out there, and you all have your own stories. You're remarkable. We should just celebrate the remarkable nature of women. I was raised by women, mentored by women, supervised by women, so many others, so many other parts of my own personal life. But that is not to say, as I said, I can celebrate that today, but I can recognize the pain. I can recognize the struggle. And I absolutely commit to being a disruptor with you to try and move things along. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Mike. And really, if you read the comments in the chat, you'll see how much what you're saying is resonating with the hundreds of people who are still on, although we're a little over time. So I'd like to just to finish up, go in reverse order and ask each of our speakers today to give their final message on, on this International Women's Day. Mike, we had quite a journey today, lots of interesting men and women. So let's go to somebody you know first. Elizabeth, do you want to go first? What's your message today?
Thank you very much, Guy. Apologies for that technical breakdown earlier on. I think for my final message, I think is that women are included and accepted as equals in every decision made about the development of healthcare systems, briefly. I think that this means women and girls in all their diversity must have equal participation in decision-making for science and public health, and call to action to increase in the proportion of women in health and care leadership.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And this is a theme that's come up. There has to be a seat at the decision-making table. Women are not just doers. They need to shape the environment in which we move forward. Mary Rosseline?
Yes, thank you. So after listening to Mike, there is no more I can say, but I would like to say to all my sisters out there that we should dare to be women. We should dare to be ourselves in this, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world created by the COVID-19. We should be creative and taking advantage of every resources and opportunity that present themselves in order to better ourselves. And we should embrace courageously our vulnerability. There is no reason that we cannot expose our vulnerability. We should embrace it courageously while fighting for a fair, just future world for ourselves, for our children, and for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Rosseline. Dr. Anjali is from India. She's the founder of an NGO there, and she works with migrant women, and she's done some remarkable work. Dr. Anjali, what's your message? And unmute, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Daya. I would say women have greater role to play in a COVID world, while in higher strata of society, women might still be struggling to get equal opportunities as men. I would say migrant women are already in a leadership position. They are taking bold decisions to migrate to cities and creating their own livelihood. They're also creating cities through their hard work, hard labor, working side by side with men. So their contribution to the economic and social development of society is outstanding. We need to be with them, support them, make them aware, empower them so that they may be healthy, wise, and prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Xavier Mendin is from Last Mile Health from Liberia. She's worked in COVID. She's working in COVID, in Ebola. She worked in Ebola and COVID. And she actually trains frontline healthcare workers and community level workers. Xavier, what's your message?
Yes, I would say women's contribution to the unpaid care work is so enormous. And so at this time, we need to step forward and reclaim our space. We need to claim the seat at the table. And that really reminds me about this, a quote from Shirley Chisholm. She said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your folding chair. So we really need a lot of folding chairs now. So, you know, women can really contribute to the decision making and lead the response, the COVID-19 response. So we can also lead a recovery.
Thank you so much, Xavier, and great work your organization is doing, and I'm really enjoying our collaboration. Adam Nurudeen is a male nurse who's trying to break the stereotypes that only women can be nurses. He's from Nigeria. He hasn't forgotten his roots in the most remote parts of northern Nigeria. Adam, what's your last wish today? What is your message?
Okay, thank you again for having me. COVID-19 has impacted women and girls in profound ways, amplifying the inequalities they face every day. It is fundamental that diverse women's voices and experiences are central to national and global recovery plans, because there is a saying that if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. However, unfortunately, women still face significant cultural and socio-economic barriers, especially in assessing leadership. As such, I'm calling for global action to support women, and women should also stand up and support themselves. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Adam. Good luck with your work there. Henni, you're next. What's your message?
I think all of us, as discussed here in the past couple of hours, we are all actors, initiators, examples, change makers in safeguarding that the equity is there, no matter what the topic, area, who's the audience, whom are we working with. And I think it's really encouraging to be part of this discussion and continue from here. I think there's still that big step to go in reaching the equity.
Thank you so much. Maria, you're up next. What's your message today?
Well, it's very, very hard to go last here with those amazing answers, but I agree with Marie Rosseline. We need to be unapologetic and we need to fight for that seat at the table. Xavier, I'm going to carry that chair with me everywhere I go so that I find myself having a seat at that table. But I do think all of us also have to offer the opportunities for women and girls. Each of us, I think, have a role to play in empowering women and girls throughout the entire course of their lives, whether they're little girls and little boys, you know, to treat women and girls with respect, with dignity, with integrity. And I think we need to challenge those boundaries every single day. And I think we should be unapologetic in doing so with respect. So I'm leaving here feeling incredibly empowered by the discussion today. And I will carry that with me every single day. So thanks, Gaia, for organizing and all of this.
Thank you so much. There's really very little for me to say, except when I first went to school at the age of 5, the head of state in my country, democratically elected, was the world's first democratically elected prime minister. So for me, there has been no other world in which, where I don't feel that I'm equal or as good as anybody else, men, women, young, old. So I think not all of us have those role models and experiences, but today we talked about some really obvious things, but also some things that are really beneath the surface. We see that in certain areas, in certain cultures, in certain insecurities, in certain situations that women have even more barriers than we thought. But what has come out today is that this is time to act. And many of your questions I've seen in the Q&A was about accountability. Well, I think accountability starts with us. Apparently, I mean, it was in the early 1900s when women fought to have political participation for the vote, right? It was only since 1975 that we have an International Women's Day that is celebrated around the world. It's going to take 100 years or more to have gender parity around the world. So let's not wait till even next year before we can take some concrete action at work, in our families. And Rosseline, Maria, and others, I agree with you. Be yourself. This is not about becoming like anybody else, but be yourself and nurture everybody around you, including those of you who are mothers, so that we do not socialize boys and girls in fundamentally different ways. That's the message I'd like to give. Mike, I can see you're still there. Do you want to have one more word? And then we're going to have one question to evaluate the session today. Mike, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yes, and just, yeah, I have to run off. I think you have to run off too. Maria's run off as well. PPE meeting, I think. Just something that I think Elizabeth and Xavier said, and I think was reflected also by everybody, and that was about making sure that women have a seat at the decision-making table. One thing to be, that's what's been missing. Lots of interest in consulting women about the future, but very little around actually making women part of the decision making. So I think we need a folding chair factory, Xavier. That's the image I'm taking away from the meeting. I'm imagining you elbowing your way into various meetings with your folding chair, and I think if that's maybe where we need to be. I think Maria, you picked up on that too. But empowering women, making sure that women are part of the decision-making architecture of the health system is absolutely vital for us in the health space, as it is in the social and family space. And as I said, maybe I should go into folding chair manufacture now, and that'll be my next big thing. So thanks all.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for joining. I know you're pressed for time. So Andrea, please, participants, just take this one multiple choice question. Be honest. I've seen lots of wonderful comments, but please rate us honestly. How was this webinar? Inspiring. You have lots to think about. Excellent, informative and useful. Good. I found some parts interesting. Or poor, a waste of my time. So as you can see, feedback is the breakfast of champions, and we accept any feedback. So go ahead. So we'll keep polling. Those of you who need to leave, I'm very sorry we ran over time, but it was such an interesting conversation. I didn't want to interrupt it. Thank you, all the speakers. Strength to you all. And as Rosseline said, strength to all of my sisters, but also strength to all my brothers who support my sisters. So men, women, children, elderly, everybody is in this fight. This is a good fight, and it is one that we should fight, but concretely. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Go honor a woman in your life today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gaya, for this outstanding panel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
So much. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosseline. Stay safe where you are. I know you're all in some tough places. Xavier, same to you. It's not easy what you're doing. Adam, we are behind you. You are young and male, and you're in the fight.
Have a nice day. Stay safe.
Great. Elizabeth, thank you. I hope you're proud of Adam. And really, we didn't get in depth into this whole issue about nursing and midwifery, but I thought it was really important to at least bring it into the conversation, because as you say, if you're not there, you can't be part of any solution. Absolutely. Henni, my deep gratitude to you always. All right. So more than 75% have voted. We can wait a few more minutes. That's fine. We'll let you go if you have to go. Thank you. Andrea, maybe we can, 82% have voted, maybe, okay, it's still going up, so maybe one more, just to the top of the minute, yeah. Mary Rosseline, I'll be in touch to talk about an initiative within WHO to engage women, particularly at the field, a lot more. So I hope you'll be a...
Thank you.
Go ahead, Xavier, sorry.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, we will stop the polling. Thank you. Great. Fantastic. So almost 95% of you found it inspiring or excellent, which is really helpful for us to plan future webinars. The next webinar we have will be on the 18th of March, and it will be really looking at learning in the French language, because it's International Day of French Language. And really, we tend to produce information for an Anglophone world. And we really don't pay enough attention to other languages, including languages such as French and Portuguese that are spoken in 20, 30 countries around the world. So thank you all. Thank you for your feedback. Have a wonderful day. We will end the webinar now, and I request my team just to stay on the call. Bye, Mary Rosseline. Bye, Anjali. Is it still live? If you can stop that.